Welcome to the second part of this tutorial. If you've missed the first part, I'll link to it in the description below. If you're going to make it the same size as mine is, print and cut out the template. What we want to do is cut a piece slightly bigger than what the bag front should be. This is so we have extra to play with in case the pink gets put in the wrong place. I use normal glue sticks to stick the fabric onto the cutaway stabilizer. Minky has a tendency to stretch on its own, so by adding a stabilizer behind it, it stops the fabric from stretching as much. Next we want to take the template and cut out the pink part. This one we want to cut to exact size. Make sure if you're using minky that the fur from both pieces runs in the same direction. It's a good idea to go and get something heavy, and I recommend leaving it to dry for about 5 minutes. For some reason my camera stopped recording, so it missed the part where I did a straight stitch all the way around the pink. We do this to hold the fabric down for the second pass. On the second pass we're going to do a satin stitch. To create a satin stitch with our sewing machines, we want to take a zigzag stitch and widen it to the width we want. I set the width at 3 mm and the step stitch at 0.8 mm. You might have to play around with this on your machine. I find that these settings work best with my machine. I don't use top stabilizer over this one. You can use it if you'd like. I just decided that if the minky poked through the first set of satin stitching, I would do a second layer. For the satin stitch, I sew with the needle down, so when we get to the corners, make sure the needle is down on the outside of the curve. This way when we turn it slightly, it's going to overlap on the inside rather than missing on the outside. Also note that this is sped up, so I'm not actually sewing this quickly. Especially on the corners, you want to sew slowly so that you get the detail correct. I decided once I got the full way around that I was going to do a second pass, because in some areas the minky was poking through my first satin stitch. I then take a second colour, slightly darker than the original pink. For the sprinkles I've used a wide but short zigzag stitch. The zigzag stitch is about 4 mm wide and 0.8 mm step, and I've stitched enough to make it look like a square. It's also a good idea to do a locking stitch at the start and at the end of these sprinkles. This will help prevent your satin stitching from coming undone in the future. When the satin stitching is complete, we want to cut the front panel to the right size. I have a rotary cutter and ruler. I measured up how wide the frame should be. I added an extra 1/4 of an inch to the border. This is to account for the seam allowance. If you don't have a rotary cutter, you're welcome to just do it with a ruler, mark it out with pen, and cut it out with scissors. I'm doing it this way because I have the tools and it is a lot quicker and easier. Once you have that side cut out, place it face down on the other side of Minky. Make sure the Minky is going in the same direction so that they are exactly opposite each other, and if both aren't square, then it doesn't matter. So, with those two panels cut, I move on to the outsides. If you wanted to make this into a plushie, just skip this part and sew the brown piece all the way around. For the zipper, I cut out 1-inch thick strips. This bit might be a little bit hard. I didn't have a zipper foot, so I just used my normal foot. I lined up the zipper with the edge of the fabric. Then I lined up both those two edges with the side of my sewing foot. It doesn't matter how far away from the zip you sew, so long as you keep the stitch distance even, so that you're not like going further away from the zipper and closer. You'll notice I started to go off track, so I moved the zipper because the actual zip part gets in the way. You'll notice that I moved the zipper out of the way, either by unzipping the zipper or zipping it up. So after moving the zipper to behind where I've already sewn, I go back and I re-sew that part. Without the lump there to push it out of the way, I'm able to sew that seam much more neatly. In my opinion, sewing up the zipper is arguably the hardest part of this project. Once you've conquered this part, it's fine. The zipper part can be difficult to add in, so if you don't want to add it in, you're welcome to leave it out and just turn it into a pillow plushie. So basically when we get to the end, we'll have two parts and they're sewn on both sides of the zipper, as shown. You'll notice I get out the measuring tape. I measured 33 inches or 85 centimeters. And then I definitely cut a lot extra, just in case I needed it. Next we want to cut out the panels for around the sides of the bag. After sewing the side pieces onto my zipper, that panel width ended up being 2 inches wide, so I cut 2-inch strips to go around the rest. Since this is a bag, I decided to make it so that I could put straps on it if I'd like. So I took a small amount of the edge paneling, about 10 inches. I sewed it in half and turned it inside out so that it was a tube. The tubing is there, so if you wanted to add a shoulder strap or handles to the bag, you're able to. It also gives it a more complete and professional look. I fold it in half and I sew it over the seam where the zipper is. You'll also notice that the thread for my sewing machine snaps a lot in this section. It's because I'm sewing over a lot of bits of fabric and it's not designed to do that. Suddenly the cover of my machine disappears. That's because the thread got caught around one of the internal mechanisms and I had to pull the machine apart. Knowing that if I put the machine thing back on it would probably mess up again, I decided just to leave it off. On the open end of the zipper it is a little bit harder to sew that end bit. So I had to pin it in place and sew over and back. It's up to you whether you want to make the fur go in the same direction all the way around. I was conscientious of it, so I made sure that all the way around the edge of the plushie, all of the fabric goes in the same direction. This isn't an important thing to do, it's just an attention to detail kind of thing. Next, what we want to do is start sewing on the zipper. You'll notice that I fold the zipper in half and find the middle section of the zipper, and then I fold the front panel in half to find the middle section of the front panel. With pins in both parts, I put them together. I recommend sewing across the top and down one side, and stopping at that corner, because you don't want to forget to put the feet and the tail in. You don't want to get all the way around and realize that you've forgotten to put the feet and the tail in. I then sew up the corner. If you're going to make this as a plushie, I recommend this being the part that you leave open to stuff. So next we want to follow pretty much the exact same procedure. We want to make sure that the corners line up on both sides so that it doesn't go wonky. What I did to make sure that all the corners line up was I pinned the corners first. So I pinned the center and I pinned the corners, and then I pinned the intermediate fabric in between. This way I knew that all the corners were going to line up. I did the same thing around all the edges. So I would pin the corner and pin along the edges and sew along that side. So we continue to do this around all the sides, matching up the corner piece to where the corner should be, and pinning all the way along, then sewing. Don't get over cocky and try to do it all at once because you might mess it up. That's just my word of advice. Now we're just on to the last minute touches. So I've taken a small pair of scissors and I'm cutting away all the extra threads from the inside that could get annoying or caught in the zip. If you've got a hot glue gun, it's useful for this part. If you don't, then you're welcome just to use a needle and thread. A hot glue gun just saves a bit of time. So what we're doing here with the feet is stick them down to the front panel. This way, when the bag is turned in the right way, the feet will sit parallel to the face rather than poking up perpendicular. Again, this is something that we don't need to do, it's just an attention to detail thing and it gives it a slightly more professional look. Watch out for the hot glue and try not to burn yourself. I use the hot glue to put it in the right area and then kind of use my scissors to push it down. In areas where I needed to add pressure, I decided to use a little bit of that extra fabric that I had and push the fabric down. Now you'll see that when we turn it in the right way, the feet and the tail want to sit parallel to the face rather than perpendicular. Again, this is just another little touch that you don't have to do. I took the cat hair brush and I brushed the fur out of the seams of the feet and the tail, and also around some of the seams around the bag. It makes the seams look less obvious, especially when we're working with fur fabrics where the fur can get caught in the seams. At this point, the last thing that we should need to do is to add the face to the bag. I use a bit of hot glue to help secure the head. I only put it in the center of the head and not towards any of the edges. So we run the needle and thread around the outside of the glue that we've just done. This way it also kind of hides the glue that we've just put on there. Together they both make a stronger bond, so that if your thread fails, that way you've also got a bit of extra glue holding it on. And we're done. If you've watched this far, you are an absolutely awesome person, and you should definitely hit that like and the subscribe button so that you can see more of my videos. If you really like this video and you want to support me further, you can check out my Patreon, where you can see videos a week early, where you can also see my work in progress and know what projects are coming up before they're even released. Thank you so much for watching, and happy sewing!